PR Connections Radio presents the Love of Business podcast. The Love of Business, nurturing the entrepreneurial spirit.
All right. Thank you for watching the Love of Business podcast. I'm your co-host, Davin Edgar, and joined with me today is Edgar Rodriguez and Nine. So we're going to be going around the table, just kind of briefly introducing ourselves to the audience. I'll go last, and then we'll jump right into some questions that Edgar's prepared us. We're kind of a roundtable style discussion. So once Edgar asks a question, Nine will answer it. And then Edgar and I will chime in as far as some thoughts and just expand on that answer before we move on to the next question. So, Nine, go ahead, give the audience about maybe 30 seconds to a minute, talk about yourself a little bit, and then we'll go on to Edgar, and then I'll close us out before we get into questions.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate that. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, evening, wherever people are listening to this at. My name is Paul Kemppainen, but I don't go by Paul. I go by Nine, which is a nickname that came from the military. These days, I own a high-end security firm here in Las Vegas, Nevada, that does what I call Protection 2.0 for people, places, and things. So quick snapshot.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Nine. And number one, we appreciate you taking the time to be on the Love of Business podcast. My name is Edgar Rodriguez. I am your other co-host, and I am a business coach through Action Coach, which leads to Davin. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll get us kicked off.
I'm Davin Edgar. So I own a real estate company right here in Southern Nevada. I mainly focus on the wealth building side. So how do you use home ownership or real estate ownership in order to build wealth? Also how business owners can grow their wealth by, leasing commercial property, as well as helping real estate agents grow their book of business. So a little bit of what I do in a nutshell there. Edgar, what's our first question of the day?
Yeah. So Nine, the Love of Business podcast is to talk about, your passion and what led you to start your business, right? So can you share your personal journey that led you to start, this high-end security company?
Sure thing. Hey, so I've been in the security field for a long time. I'll go super quick just through the journey and then dip into how I started my company, Sisu Enlightened Protection. Naval officer a number of years ago, moved on from there. I was a Secret Service agent, so did protection and investigations on the cyber side. Jumped from there to the Central Intelligence Agency because I had a fascination in James Bond and all things James Bond as a child. Just past Father's Day, so that's kind of what kicked that off. I go from the Central Intelligence Agency to the National Park Service, where I oversee security and intelligence for them. So that's everything from the gun that shot Abraham Lincoln up to, like, say, the Statue of Liberty on the high end. And then while I'm there, I get a quirk fascination in joining the space program. I apply to be an astronaut, get rejected, but I knew I'd be rejected because I didn't have the background. I took my rejection letter. Ultimately, somebody introduced me to the idea of this company called SpaceX in Los Angeles, California, and Elon Musk. So I applied. Ultimately, they said, why do you want to work? Like, the security stuff totally makes sense. Why do you want to work at a rocket company? I said, hey, here's my rejection letter. And they were basically like, you're hired here. So that started like almost a decade-long journey, protecting what I call the future of flight. And that led to the reason why I'm in the entrepreneur space today. Ultimately, Richard Branson ultimately says a great place to start a business from is frustration. And I was a bit frustrated at the quality of security that is available in the private industry space for people, causes. So ultimately for people, places, and things that I look up to and I enjoy. So I created a firm, incidentally placed it here in Las Vegas, Nevada, which I love this city. And I'm up, rock and rolling, and working with a number of cool clients that I care about, providing them with some high quality protection.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I've gotten to know Nine over the last little over a year now, and building a good relationship with him and knowing about his journey. So I'm excited to dive, a little bit deeper in your passion, right? So with that being said, what makes you the most passionate about the business, and how does how does it impact your success?
So what makes me the most passionate about my business or about my industry? So what I would say is this: I've just seen security in a lot of different disciplines, everything from cybersecurity to protecting people, events, and things like that. I ultimately work for Elon Musk, like I mentioned, and you can imagine that the bar for high quality and separately innovation is like ridiculous. I talked to a lot of people about the idea when I was working at SpaceX. Hey, do you have like a pretty strong program? I said, man, if you're working for Elon Musk and you're not, a man who is doing all this re-engineering of everything, and you're not re-engineering the security space,
right,
you wouldn't make it. So long story short, I would say probably a key ingredient of how I operate and my company operates is I'm very much focused on innovation, and then also ultimately just solving problems. I think the security industry as a whole is just a bit dated. So I'm a student of the industry, so I don't want to talk bad about it. But what I would say, interestingly, it's an industry that its Achilles heel is that it ultimately looks at and mitigates risk. But when it comes to change, it doesn't want to change because it has that Achilles heel. It does not like risk. So I would say, having worked for Elon, he is all about risks, and that's in my DNA.
Yeah. And I mean, change is risky, but at the end of the day, if you're going to take big risks, you have to find new ways in order to mitigate them, right? Like that's the end goal, right? With innovation. So that's really cool that you come from it, from that perspective, so just, I don't know. Yeah. I love that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would just say I'm passionate about that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about it, right, if you come from working from a high end, right, like a SpaceX, right, and knowing that the innovation that's happening there, it gives you a different perspective when it comes to business. And with what you're doing with Sisu, it's creating that standard, right? Not the expectation, but now there's a new standard to high level security and how you go about it. And that's what I wanted to get into is you talked about it right now, that it's an evolving, because that industry has been set in its ways for decades, right? And you have to
centuries
innovate, right?
But
it goes
go
back. Yeah, it goes back, right? So it's like, how do you see it from what it was back then to what it's evolved to today?
So that's a good question. And then incidentally, I'm about to release a book called The Tao of the Modern Day Samurai that embodies a lot of what I'm about to tell you. Ultimately, I like to use history as a lens to look at a lot of different things. You can go back and you find some interesting things there. Long ago, like to me, the samurai like epitomized like what protection is all about. They were like, let's be blunt for a second. They were badasses in the protective world. They were awesome. They were legends, right? But sadly, they disappeared into legend at the dawn of the industrial age because they didn't stay relevant. Right? They kind of clung to their armor and their swords and all these other things and didn't adopt like modern practices and that kind of thing. The samurai were all about furthering the art of protection and becoming the best protectors they could and all these other things. And like in their place, after they kind of departed, the security industry crept in. And what was it about? It was about profit. It was about bottom lines. It was about using people as commodities. It was not about furthering the art of protection. So I think like if you fast forward to today, you see a lot of the problems inherent in the industry kind of under that lens, which is, ultimately it's it's run by some large multinational firms that don't invest a lot into their personnel or training or these kind of things. And they're very much risk averse, not into innovation, not, rocking the boat with respect to their business model. But what I would say conversely, if you pivot around, we're on the cusp of like an era of unprecedented change. Everything from AI to robotics to advanced computing to new advances in aerospace and all that. And I'm firmly, convinced of the idea that the security industry at large, how it stands today, because of these kind of flaws that we're talking about, isn't well equipped to tackle some of these challenges. And in the end, when we talk about change, like Davin brought it up earlier, which is pretty intriguing. These industries like AI and robotics and all these other things, these engineers that are building these efforts will ultimately adopt those roles if the security industry doesn't kind of quickly change. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there, right? Is knowing how like you talked about the get-go, right? Of how it's evolved over time, and knowing how to stay ahead, right? If you don't keep up with modern time, you will get left in the dust, right? And just like in business, like the innovation that happens not just in the security field, right, but just in business in general, like how do you adapt and overcome? And that's something that's been engraved in us, right, since the military. And even in people who haven't served, they got to learn how to pivot or keep up and know, hey, I got to start just like chess, right? Got to know what the next move is before they even make their move.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
And something I wanted to touch on too. You mentioned how a lot of companies aren't investing in their people, but I think what people don't realize in business sometimes is that there are rock stars out there who want to perform at a really high level, and all you got to do is be willing to invest in people, and then you'll attract them. So I'm sure that that's what you're trying to do with your team, based on what it sounds like. I'm sure you've got some really, really hardcore dudes who are really about what you're about. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah, so just like on that wavelength, I will say that I perceive security professionals as, and what I'll use is the term protector, because I prefer that industry moniker more than security. The word security back in the samurai day didn't even exist. Mm-hmm. It was all about protection of people, places, and things. But what I will say is I view modern protectors as professional athletes, and you should treat them like that. And I don't think that the industry does a great job of that. A good example, I went to the Vegas Golden Knights game the other day, right? And they do all hey, congrats on the Stanley Cup, right? But they do all this pageantry around a single individual before they take the ice. And the idea is my ask for like probably other security firms and owners is, what are you doing before you put your people on the field? And if it's like handing them a clipboard where you sign in and stuff like that, or maybe counseling or lecturing them about things that were wrong the last rotation they were on, something is wrong with your firm. You should be more like professional athletes and how they treat them instead of the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, how you train, right, is exactly how they're going to perform, and knowing, hey, here are the possible outcomes. If this happens, how do you react, right? And it's perfecting the craft. Mm-hmm. Earlier, you talked about you had a passion. So I want to dive on that, Nine. How do you keep your passion alive and burning, especially during the tough times?
Yeah, I would say the thing that is the fuel. So there's a very cool entrepreneur in the Vegas landscape called Nedalina Nasruddin, and she does a lot of, kind of leadership-based stuff. And she and I talked about this topic, and then ultimately it's like a drive to learn is what keeps me kind of going. I'm just fascinated by like, hey, maybe, and I was like a perfect fit to be in the Musk machinery. It's like someone that in turn is like, why would we do that? I don't understand why that's not working. Why would we need to do this? So it's like a constant interest in learning is what kind of keeps me going, even when things are broken. I wouldn't say it's an interest in learning, like, why did this break? Why did I just like have this door closed on me? But it's more so like, that's interesting. Like, I just don't understand how this would kind of happen. And I kind of use learning to further my path.
Yeah. Yeah. And in knowing that you're doing that, right. And it's being aware, okay, if this door didn't open or they shut this door, how do I make sure that doesn't happen again? Right, because you would think even in your field, right, it's just like any business. There's going to be what I like to call speed bumps, right? And what type of velocity are you running at towards that speed bump to get over it, right? I think
it's those ones in the garage that are like the fangs that pop the tires.
Right, they deflate you sometimes, but how do you make sure? And we touched on it earlier, right? It's training, right? It's knowing the obstacles, knowing how to overcome the obstacles, but it's through questioning to make sure I like to use what we call AIDA, right? It's attention, interest, attract, and desire, right? So by asking really good questions, you get their attention, you get them interested, you attract them, and then it's that desirable outcome. So it's knowing how to overcome those doors that won't open. So, and you said, that's interesting and it's intriguing. okay, how do we make sure that doesn't happen again, right?
Yeah, life is capricious though. Sometimes the doors don't open because they're not meant to open.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say in that whole wavelength, I'm a big believer in this, which is you need to, like, if you're not getting enough doors closed in your face, you're not pushing hard enough on whatever you're doing, right? And then a good way to buffer the natural human feeling of it really is not cool to have a door shut in your face, right? Is surround yourself with good, like-minded, positive people. So like Edgar, I know you from Bunker Labs, great group to help buffer those kind of storms, and then create what I have. Some time ago, I decided to create something I call, because I wanted to have that, called the Boxer's Corner. It's just like a small club that I kind of run that has a couple of different people over time that I've met that we convene once in a while and like talk to each other about what's up out there. It's like a place to come back from kind of the fight, get in the corner of the ring, spit in the bucket, like vent and all these other things. Maybe get a little advice on like how your shots are landing or not that you may not see, and then get back out in the ring. So I would recommend for sure, surrounding yourself with groups like, in my case, Bunker or the Boxer's Corner.
Yeah, and I like that, right? Because that's knowing that you have to have those centers of influence, right? These are people who are in it with you, and they're gonna talk about the blind spots that you might not see, or they've already been through this journey, and they're gonna give you the advice on how they got through it, even though that might not be relevant to your specific industry. The situation doesn't change, right? It's the storm that we're weathering, or we're about to weather, and it's unpredictable because you never know what's going to happen. But going through like your Boxer's Corner, Bunker Labs, or just having your center of influence. So for me, I like to call it my starting five, right? Who's in my starting five that I know I can always call, always communicate with, and they're not going to judge me.
Hey, I better be on that list. Put me on the list, man. Put me in the what do you call it, like the backup squad or farm league if I'm not on there.
Yeah. Everybody has to have some people around them that have that like iron sharpens iron mentality, and you can get it more than just with random people that you meet. I mean, there's Bible studies out there, and you'd hope that, a lot of those places are centered around truth. But even if you're not, a person of faith, there's other areas where you can create that, but yeah, you have to have some people in your life who can just tell you like straight up, this is what you're doing wrong, and you can fix it. So, because there's not that many opportunities out there in the world. We live in a soft and fuzzy world that doesn't want to tell us what's going on. They just want to say no without actually giving the correction. So that's good that you do that.
Yeah, and something in that, because I want to shed more light on it, is number one, you don't want people in your corner who are going to tell you every single time, hey, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. You need the brute honest truth, right? 100%. And that's what's going to build that. Okay, understood, roger that. Here's how we're gonna tackle it, right? And that's why I said the blind spots. It's those people that are gonna give you that hard truth of asking more questions so you can think through the situation. So if it ever happens again, now you know how. Hey, here's how, and that's what fuels you, right? That's what we talked about. How do you fuel through those adversary times? Which leads to the next question. How do you align your business goals, 9, and your personal passion and values?
So, Edgar, I think you've heard me touch on this answer before, but oftentimes I have a hard time of unpacking these two worlds. I think for sure, if you set up a business, it better align with your personal interests and your passion set. And then you need to figure out ways that it can unlock what else drives you. So say, for example, with myself, I love to learn. And, for me, I have a business that helps people, places, and things. I literally just last week was with a large energy company that is like doing some very innovative things on the East Coast. And while I'm there doing that, I'm learning, or I might be around a VIP or something like that in Vegas. And then I'm also kind of like learning through that as well. And there's plenty of adventure to be had in the security field. And I don't mean like traditional like Hollywoodish stuff. But through my field, I've done everything from go to the Super Bowl and do protection there to do search and rescue training with the National Park Service to work alongside astronauts. So like ultimately, I would say this is go back. If you're going to be in business, make sure it aligns with a personal interest, personal values, and then separately affords these opportunities that will fuel your day-to-day drive. And I think the more of those, like now that I think about that and chat with you guys, the more of those the more of those that you have in place, the more effective that fuel becomes, right? It can't just be one thing. It has to be like a so when certain aspects of the business aren't hitting or survive, thriving or whatever the case may be, other aspects of what you're up to keep you motivated.
Davin, anything you want to add?
Man, yeah, that's a lot to unpack in there. But I guess I do agree, because it's like if you're passionate about your business, like you're gonna do things, take more risks. You're gonna want to improve it in a way that nobody else will. Like, and in business, nobody can do it for you. At the same time, though, it's also very tempting in business to chase that opportunity and say, well, I'm not necessarily passionate about that thing, but I have this opportunity. I can go pursue it, and I can make a lot of money at it. So you do have to balance sometimes the opportunity versus the passion. But sometimes if your passions are in line with that opportunity, it's like, then you're golden, right? But yeah, because you can have all the passion in the world, but there's no market for something,
Yeah, I'll shed a little light, because this is an opportunity that came to our plate literally less than a week ago, and I reached out to Nine, and we got invited to speak at this year's coming Military Influencer Conference, and it's the passion behind what we're doing that led to this opportunity. So this is a journey that I thought, this will happen in 3 years, and I feel like it's happening faster, and it definitely needs to be taken care of quicker, rather than later. And it's that fuel behind that's leading towards this, right? And that's what I wanted to unpack with Nine, is that I've seen the passion because I've gotten to know you going through Bunker Labs, right? And seeing the impact, the level of detail and the value that not only you bring to the table in your other cohort members, but now as a captain for Bunker, you want to surround yourself with those like-minded people, right? And it's learning other people's passion that helps you find your passion sometimes. Mine, I didn't realize until just recently. It was earlier this year, and now it's literally what's fueling me, because I always hear or I always thought it was my kids. And it's not my kids, because at some point in time, they're going to be long gone. And that's what I had, that moment where I was really, really in deep thought of like, what fuels most people, and how do I feel that? And then it just hit me. And now things are coming into fruition. But I'll lead to our next and final question before we wrap up, because I know we're going to get short on time. But are there any unexpected ways, Nine, in which your business has influenced or been influenced by the community?
That's a fascinating question. So lately, I've become very so there's two different aspects of that. I would say very much on the Vegas side. I'm definitely about this community. I have loved Vegas. I've been coming here since the probably late to mid 90s, and increasingly so, and eventually moved here. And I love to be a part of the fabric of this community, supporting things like Neon Museum, and then separately do a lot of like homeless outreach and go into what people don't really maybe understand is there's hundreds of miles of tunnels below Vegas that are occupied by the homeless, and then go with a group called Shine a Light locally to do a lot of outreach efforts there. But what I would say about community is something else. And indulge me for a second on this wavelength, which is the samurai, right? If you go back to the history at the beginning of the chat, they were all about community, right? They actually integrated into the communities. They did things besides protection and warfare and stuff like that. They actually did city planning and all these other things. They influenced the groups around them. Community was very important. And, fast forward to today, I think community is like absolutely critically important, right? These days you can't, like the traditional way of doing business has changed. Now it's about building an audience, separately transitioning that audience to a community, and then in and around that community, kind of taking a hill, if you will, be it like, say, for example, homeless outreach, a business cause, or something like that. So community is critically important. And then probably on a related theme with that, I'm doing a lot with my business in and around people that are building communities lately, because with communities come problems. So I've been surprising to myself as a business is I've met a lot of people who aren't your traditional like VIPs or celebs that are encountering those type of issues. And there is no source for them to go and seek counsel, guidance, others that can help them navigate these things. Everything from the like loss or takedown of their YouTube channel because of an overseas hacker to like say, for example, a singer now that I'm working with who's being threatened and stuff like that. There is no resource for them. So I've created like a private community I call the escape room to help those people out. So community is an interesting and novel area of what I'm up to and a passionate thing for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, community is a good one because I mean I think people really they really underestimate the power of being connected because they think business, they think, okay, well I gotta get a billboard, I gotta advertise on Facebook, I gotta do this, and then they forget their word of mouth marketing and they forget that they actually can solve problems that they're just gonna organically run into without needing to ask for the business. Just the fact that you're a resource for other people, and vice versa. I mean, when you have other people who can be a resource for you in return, not because, you're going to get something out of them today, but because like later on down the line, you just know that you're connected with like-minded people who are also achieving what they're achieving. It's a good place to be. So, and that's cool. I like how you mentioned that there's like a hill to stand on, like for me, it's wildlife. But for other people, it's veteran communities, and for for your business, it sounds like you're passionate about the homeless, and that's awesome. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you think about community, right? In the business journey with community, is what as a coach I've always instilled in people that one voice is not as loud as the community you surround yourself with and the community you can build. Because as a
100%.
business leader, right? As a business leader, you choose your community. Your community doesn't choose you. So think about that. You build it. It doesn't build you.
Yes.
Right? And you got to learn how to lead that community, even through business and in what you're doing. Because that's what's going to help echo your voice, not just in Vegas, but across the country, across the globe, right? And what
100%.
you're doing now in the court, right? In creating the boxer's corner, right? And now through the escape room, you're building two different communities for people to have an outlet, right? To be able to come together to not only connect, but share, hey, here's what's going on. And how do we get through this?
100%. I would say, I'll just grab the mic for 2 seconds. I know we're probably getting close to time. But one thing I did learn recently, I talked to this girl who is very much involved in community building, has done some great work with Facebook and all that. And she provided some interesting insights and introduced me to a couple of others. And I learned something pretty recently that it didn't really occur to me, which is actually communities need to be exclusionary. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like, what do you mean by that? It's like a community without some degree of exclusivity is not very powerful. So back to what you were saying, Davin, about the, it's getting a community aligned around a particular issue, right? It's exclusionary, right? My group is for people that are passionate about wildlife or wildlife protection or something like that. It doesn't mean others can't join, but this is like our exclusivity. I think that's like critical. And the more you try to create a community that's kind of just very broad based, it's not as effective or functional.
Yeah. Absolutely there. You hit the nail on the head, and we do have to wrap up here. So really quickly, let's each take about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe mention something that they'd like to see in the podcast in the future, maybe something we didn't talk about, or just expand on something that we talked about that we really appreciated. So Nine, we'll have you up first, and Edgar, and I'll close this out right at the end.
So two things for me. I'm super passionate about that homeless issue. So I think it'd be super cool if you all hosted someone from the Shine a Light organization. It's a tremendous one here in Vegas. And then separately, I think for sure that topic of community is like, there's a lot to unpack there, as you say. And it's an important topic. And I'd be happy to broker some introductions to some people that are leaning forward with respect to community building. It's a fascinating topic.
Yep.
Rock on, rock on.
Well, for me, Nine, there's some stuff we are working with on the homelessness side, so that's what I'm excited about, especially on the veteran side. But I'll leave it to Davin because I know we are short on time.
All good, all good. I really loved just hearing about the things that you're doing, like those positive habits and mindsets that are creating some real results for you, like in the innovation side, on the change side, on the community building things. Those are all awesome. And again, I'm trying to keep this short because we gotta get off the air really soon here, because this is definitely a good one. We packed in a lot in a few minutes. Nine, real quick, right before we get off the air, how can people get a hold of you?
So it's here on my moniker on the screen, just my website.
Okay.
It's sisu.la.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, people can reach me at davinsundvik.com. Edgar, where can they reach you at? Edgar, oh, you there?
For me, just find me on LinkedIn.
There you go. Awesome. Yep. All right. You guys have been watching the Love of Business podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.